Remove those dog tags immediately. Judge Robert Hayes slammed his gavel as 12-year-old Emma Anderson clutched the silver chains around her neck. The family courtroom erupted in whispers. Her father, Michael Anderson, half rose from his seat, face flushed with anger. "Your Honor, please!" "Sit down, Professor Anderson." The judge's voice cut through the air like a blade. "This is a court of law, not a costume party." Emma's fingers tightened around the worn metal tags. 8 years of custody hearings, 8 years of her mother's empty chair, 8 years of nobody believing the truth. "She's classified Navy," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible above the courtroom noise. Laughter exploded from the gallery. Judge Hayes leaned forward, his 20-year Navy experience giving weight to his words. "Young lady, I served in the United States Navy. There are no women in those operations. Period." The dog tags felt ice-cold against Emma's skin. Her mother's name etched in metal. Her mother's blood type. Her mother's sacrifice that nobody understood. "She is," Emma said louder, tears threatening. "And these prove it." More laughter, more mockery, until the courtroom doors burst open. "Before we continue, if you believe a child should never be mocked for defending their parents' honor, type honor below. And tell me where you're watching from. This story hits different when I know who's standing with Emma Anderson." I read every comment. The mahogany-paneled courtroom of Cook County carried the weight of decades of family disputes. Judge Hayes had seen it all: deadbeat parents, custody battles, children caught in the crossfire. But he had little patience for what he viewed as military fantasies used to excuse parental abandonment. "Miss Wells," he addressed the opposing counsel, "please present your case for why Professor Anderson should receive full custody." Patricia Wells rose smoothly, her expensive suit and calculating smile radiating confidence. "Your Honor, the evidence is overwhelming. Commander Sarah Anderson, if that's even her real rank, has abandoned her daughter for 8 consecutive years. No birthdays, no Christmas mornings, no parent-teacher conferences." Michael Anderson's jaw clenched. His hands gripped the table as Wells continued her character assassination of his wife. The woman he still loved despite everything. The woman whose absence he couldn't explain even to himself. "When Emma was hospitalized with appendicitis at age 7, Wells continued, where was her mother? When she won the state swimming championship last year, who wasn't there to cheer? When she needed surgery to repair a broken arm from a bicycle accident, who couldn't even be reached by phone? Each accusation landed like a physical blow. Emma sat perfectly still, her military posture unconsciously mimicking someone who had trained her in discipline from afar. Her fingers never left the dog tags. Judge Hayes nodded approvingly. "Continue, counselor." "Your Honor, we have documented evidence of 8 years of maternal neglect. Medical records showing Professor Anderson as the sole emergency contact. School records with his name alone on pickup authorizations. Even Emma's passport application lists only her father as available guardian." The judge turned his stern gaze to Emma. "Young lady, when was the last time you saw your mother?" Emma's voice remained steady despite the hostile atmosphere. 14 months ago. She had to leave suddenly." "Had to leave," Judge Hayes repeated mockingly. "For what? Secret missions? Classified operations?" His tone dripped with sarcasm that made several gallery members chuckle. "Yes, sir," Emma replied simply. "And these dog tags you're wearing, where did they come from?" Emma's fingers traced the worn edges of the metal. "They were my mother's. From her first deployment. She gave them to me when I was 5 and told me to wear them when I needed to remember that some people serve something bigger than themselves." "Deployment to where?" "I don't know, sir. That's classified too." The laughter was louder this time. Judge Hayes removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly, a gesture that somehow managed to convey both condescension and dismissal. "Miss Anderson, I understand that children sometimes create elaborate stories to cope with parental abandonment, but this court deals in facts, not fantasy." "These aren't fantasies," Emma said, her voice gaining strength. She pulled the dog tags from beneath her shirt, letting them catch the harsh courtroom lighting. The metal gleamed dully, obviously worn from years of handling. Judge Hayes squinted at the tags. Even from his elevated position, He could see they appeared authentic. Military-issue dog tags weren't something you could buy at a costume shop. The engraving was precise, regulation standard. Sarah M. Anderson, Emma read aloud. United States Navy, blood type O negative. Next of kin. She paused, her voice catching slightly. Next of kin, Emma Rose Anderson. The courtroom fell quieter. Patricia Wells shifted uncomfortably, clearly not expecting this level of detail. Young lady, Judge Hayes continued, though his tone had lost some of its earlier mockery, anyone can have dog tags made. Military surplus stores sell them. They prove nothing about actual service. Emma reached into her jacket pocket and pulled out a small digital device. She also gave me this. The device looked like a modified smartphone, but its interface was unlike anything commercially available. Military-grade encryption symbols scrolled across the screen. That looks like a toy, Wells interjected quickly. It's a secure communication device, Emma replied. She taught me the emergency protocols when I was 9. If something happened to Dad, if I was ever in real danger, I was supposed to activate it. Michael Anderson stared at his daughter in shock. Emma, you never told me about that. She made me promise not to, unless it was a real emergency. Emma looked at her father with apologetic eyes. She said some secrets protect the people you love. Judge Hayes leaned forward. And you've never used this alleged communication device? Once, Emma admitted quietly. When I was 10 and had pneumonia. Dad was at a conference and couldn't get back immediately. I was alone in the hospital and scared. What happened? Within 6 hours, a woman in a Navy uniform showed up at the hospital. She said she was a family friend, but she knew things about me that only someone close to our family would know. She stayed until Dad arrived. Patricia Wells scribbled notes frantically. This was not part of the narrative she had constructed. Did this woman identify herself? Judge Hayes asked. Lieutenant Commander Santos. She showed me pictures on her phone of my mother during what she called training exercises. Women in military gear, in ocean environments, in what looked like extremely challenging physical conditions. The gallery had gone completely silent now. Even the court reporter had stopped typing, listening intently to Emma's testimony. Your Honor, Wells interrupted, this is all hearsay and could easily be fabricated. Let the child finish, Judge Hayes said curtly. Emma continued. Lieutenant Commander Santos told me that my mother was serving in a program so classified that most of the Navy didn't even know it existed. She said the women in the program had proved that gender wasn't a limitation in naval special operations, but that the proof had to remain secret until the right time. And when would that right time be? The judge asked. When the program was ready to be acknowledged publicly, when they had enough successful missions to overcome the doubts of people like... Emma paused, looking directly at Judge Hayes. People who think women can't do everything men can do in the military. A flush crept up the judge's neck. His own military service had been conventional, JAG Corps, legal work, nothing remotely approaching special operations, but his certainty about what was and wasn't possible in the modern Navy was beginning to waver. These are extraordinary claims, young lady. Yes, sir. My mother does extraordinary things. Michael Anderson watched his daughter with growing amazement. For years, he had wondered about the small details that never quite added up. Sarah's incredible physical conditioning, her knowledge of weapons and tactics that seemed far beyond conventional Navy training, the phone calls conducted in languages he didn't recognize. Emma's fingers found a small scar on the dog tags, barely visible unless you knew where to look. See this mark? She told me it happened during Hell Week. Not regular Navy Hell Week, a different kind. Judge Hayes found himself leaning forward despite his skepticism. What kind of Hell Week? The kind where they find out if women can survive the same training that breaks most men. Emma's voice carried a pride that seemed far too mature for her 12 years. She said only 3 women made it through her class, out of 27 who started. And the others? Dropped out. Medical discharges. Some just couldn't handle the psychological pressure of being told every day that they didn't belong there. Patricia Wells attempted to regain control. Your Honor, this is clearly a fabricated story designed to generate sympathy. Ma'am, Emma interrupted, looking directly at Wells. My mother has scars on her hands from rope work that would take years to develop. She has a reconstructed shoulder from what she told me was a training accident. She can hold her breath underwater for over 4 minutes. She speaks 3 languages fluently and 2 others conversationally. She knows navigation techniques that aren't taught in civilian schools. The specificity of Emma's knowledge was becoming increasingly difficult to dismiss. How do you know about her breath-holding abilities? Judge Hayes asked. She taught me to swim, not regular swimming, tactical swimming, how to move underwater without making surface disturbances, how to control your breathing under stress, how to use the ocean as cover instead of fighting against it. Michael Anderson's eyes widened. He had always wondered why Emma's swimming technique was so unusual, so efficient. The local swim coach had commented on her extraordinary breath control and her ability to remain calm in challenging water conditions. She also taught me about team loyalty, Emma continued. About how special operations teams become family, about how you never leave anyone behind, even if it costs you everything. What do you mean by that? Emma's voice became softer, more reverent. She lost someone during a mission, someone on her team who didn't make it home. The courtroom was completely silent now. That's why she wears his dog tags, too, under her uniform, where no one can see them. Emma touched her own tags gently. She gave me hers because she said I needed to understand that service means sacrifice, that some people give everything so others can live freely. Judge Hayes felt a familiar chill. He had seen that kind of grief in combat veterans. The weight of survivors' guilt that changed how a person carried themselves forever. What was this person's name? Petty Officer Marcus Thompson. He died saving her and 2 other team members during what she called a situation that went bad. She said he was 23 years old, from Alabama, wanted to be a teacher after his service was complete. The details were too specific, too emotional to be fabricated by a child. She said the hardest part wasn't losing him. The hardest part was not being able to tell his family what really happened. They were told he died in a training accident, but he died a hero, completing a mission that saved American lives. Patricia Wells looked increasingly uncomfortable. Her neat narrative of parental abandonment was crumbling under the weight of Emma's testimony. Your Honor, Wells tried again, even if these stories are true, they don't excuse 8 years of absence from a child's life. Ma'am, Emma said firmly, my mother didn't choose to be absent. She chose to serve. There's a difference. Judge Hayes set down his pen. His certainty about this case was evaporating like morning fog. Everything the child was saying had the ring of truth, backed by details that would be impossible for a 12-year-old to fabricate convincingly. Young lady, Judge Hayes said, his voice carrying less conviction than before, you're asking this court to believe that your mother is involved in classified military operations that officially don't exist. I'm not asking you to believe anything, sir, Emma replied with startling composure. I'm telling you what I know to be true. Patricia Wells stood abruptly. Your Honor, this child has been coached to present these elaborate stories. No 12-year-old has this level of detailed knowledge about military operations. Unless they were taught by someone who lived them, Emma interrupted. Judge Hayes rubbed his temples. His 20 years of military service told him that Emma's knowledge was too specific, too authentic to be fabricated. But his judicial experience made him wary of accepting extraordinary claims without extraordinary evidence. Miss Anderson, if your mother truly serves in such a classified capacity, surely there would be some way to verify her status without compromising operational security. Emma nodded. She told me that if I was ever in a situation where her service was questioned, there was a protocol. What kind of protocol? Emma pulled out the military-grade communication device again. This connects to a secure network. If I activate it with the proper codes, it sends an emergency signal to her chain of command, indicating that her family is in distress. And you think they would respond? She promised they would. She said the Navy takes care of its own, especially when someone's service is being dishonored. Judge Hayes felt a chill. Something in Emma's tone suggested she wasn't bluffing. Your Honor, Patricia Wells interjected desperately, you cannot allow a child to manipulate these proceedings with theatrical props. They're not props, Emma said quietly. And I'm not manipulating anything. I'm defending my mother's honor. The courtroom held its collective breath as Emma's fingers moved across the device's interface with practiced precision. She entered a series of codes that were clearly memorized, not improvised. Michael Anderson watched his daughter with growing amazement and concern. Emma, are you sure about this? Dad, they're calling Mom a liar. They're saying she abandoned us. She didn't abandon us. She served something bigger than herself, and I won't let them dishonor that service. Judge Hayes found himself torn between judicial skepticism and growing unease. Emma's certainty was absolute, her knowledge too detailed for fabrication. If I allow you to activate that device, what exactly do you expect to happen? Someone will come, Emma said simply. Someone with the authority to explain what they can explain without compromising national security. Patricia Wells looked panicked. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Ma'am, Judge Hayes said curtly, this entire case has been irregular from the beginning. He turned back to Emma. Young lady, if you activate that device and nothing happens, this court will have to consider your testimony as creative fiction rather than factual evidence. And if someone does come? Judge Hayes paused. Then this court will have to reconsider everything we think we know about your mother's service. Emma's finger hovered over the activation sequence. Sir, may I ask you something? Proceed. When you served in the Navy, did you ever encounter situations where you had to take things on faith? Where you had to trust that your superiors knew things you didn't know? The question hit uncomfortably close to home. Yes, this is one of those situations. I'm asking you to trust that my mother serves with honor, even if you can't see all the evidence right now. Judge Hayes stared at the 12-year-old who was speaking with the wisdom of someone far beyond her years. Activate your device, Miss Anderson. Emma pressed the final sequence. The device emitted a single, soft tone, then displayed a brief message in what appeared to be military code. Then they waited. The courtroom doors opened with military precision exactly 7 minutes after Emma activated the emergency signal. Captain Daniel Foster entered first, his Navy dress blues immaculate, his bearing unmistakably that of a senior naval officer. Behind him walked Lieutenant Commander Maria Santos, whose presence immediately commanded attention. Judge Hayes rose automatically, military protocol overriding judicial custom. The gallery fell into complete silence. Captain Foster, United States Navy, the officer announced. I believe you have questions regarding Commander Sarah Anderson's service status. Patricia Wells looked as if she had seen a ghost. The theatrical props she had dismissed were proving to be very real indeed. Captain, Judge Hayes said, his voice carefully controlled. I wasn't expecting military personnel to respond to a civilian custody hearing, nor were we expecting Commander Anderson's service to be questioned in a public forum, Captain Foster replied. However, given the circumstances, we're prepared to provide limited clarification. Lieutenant Commander Santos stepped forward. Your Honor, I'm Commander Anderson's immediate superior in her current assignment. The young lady's emergency signal indicated that her mother's honor and service record were being publicly challenged. Emma looked at Santos with recognition. You're the one who stayed with me at the hospital. Yes, Emma. And I told you then that the Navy takes care of its own. Judge Hayes felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. Commander Santos, can you verify Sarah Anderson's naval service without compromising classified information? Commander Anderson has served with distinction for 12 years in increasingly classified capacities. Her current assignment requires extended periods away from family for national security purposes. What type of assignment? Santos exchanged a glance with Captain Foster, who nodded slightly. Commander Anderson is part of a pilot program testing the integration of female personnel into naval special warfare operations. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Hayes banged his gavel for order. Are you telling this court that female Navy SEALs exist? I'm telling this court that Commander Anderson serves in a capacity that requires the highest levels of physical conditioning, mental discipline, and operational security. The specifics of her duties remain classified. Patricia Wells found her voice. Even if this is true, it doesn't excuse 8 years of parental absence. Ma'am, Captain Foster interrupted. Commander Anderson's service record includes 3 commendations for operations that prevented significant threats to American civilians. Her absence from family events was not a choice. It was a sacrifice made in service to her country. Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. I told you they would come. Judge Hayes sat down heavily. Captain Foster, why wasn't this information available earlier? Why allow these proceedings to continue if Commander Anderson's service could be verified? Sir, the program Commander Anderson serves in has been classified at the highest levels. We don't typically reveal operational details to civilian courts. Foster paused. However, when a service member's child is being mocked for defending her parents' honor, exceptions are made. Lieutenant Commander Santos moved to stand behind Emma. This young lady has shown remarkable discretion in protecting classified information while defending her mother's reputation. She's demonstrated the kind of loyalty and courage we value in naval personnel. Michael Anderson spoke for the first time in minutes. Sarah never told me the details of her service. I knew it was classified, but I had no idea of the level. Professor Anderson, Captain Foster said, your wife's service requires absolute secrecy, even from family members. The fact that she maintained that security while serving her country speaks to her professional integrity. Judge Hayes looked at the dog tags still visible around Emma's neck. And those tags? Authentic military issue, Santos confirmed. Commander Anderson gave them to her daughter as a tangible connection to her service when direct communication wasn't possible. The judge's 20 years of military experience told him he was witnessing something extraordinary, a classified program being partially revealed to protect a service member's honor and family. The courtroom doors opened once more, and Commander Sarah Anderson entered in full Navy dress blues. Her presence was immediate and commanding, shoulders squared, chin lifted, eyes forward. The uniform was crisp, the insignia telling a story of distinguished service, but it was her bearing that filled the room with respectful silence. Emma's breath caught. 8 months since she had last seen her mother, and now she stood before the court in full military honor. Commander Anderson reporting as ordered, sir, Sarah said, rendering a perfect salute to Captain Foster. Judge Hayes stood again, his earlier mockery replaced by something approaching reverence. The woman before him carried herself with the unmistakable confidence of someone who had been tested in ways he could only imagine. Commander, Captain Foster said, we've been explaining your service status to the court. Sarah's eyes found Emma, and for just a moment, the military bearing softened. Thank you for keeping faith, sweetheart. Always, Emma replied, the same phrase she had used in their last conversation. Patricia Wells made one final attempt. Your Honor, even with military confirmation, 8 years of absence speaks to priorities that place service above family. Ma'am, Sarah said, turning toward Wells with steady composure. For 8 years, I've served in operations that kept threats away from American families, including yours. My daughter understood that sacrifice even when adults chose not to believe her. Judge Hayes cleared his throat. Commander Anderson, this court has heard testimony about your classified service. Can you explain within security constraints why your duties required such extended family separation? Sir, my unit has operated in environments and situations that required absolute commitment. We've completed missions that officially never happened, protecting Americans who will never know they were in danger. Sarah's voice carried quiet authority. Every day away from my daughter was a choice to serve something larger than my personal desires. Lieutenant Commander Santos stepped forward. Your Honor, if I may add, Commander Anderson's unit has the highest success rate in our special warfare community. They've proven capabilities that many thought impossible. Michael Anderson found his voice. Sarah, why couldn't you tell me? All these years, I thought. You thought I had chosen my career over our family. Sarah finished gently. I know, and that burden was part of the sacrifice. Letting you and Emma believe something less than the truth in order to protect the truth. Emma stood and walked to her mother. Mom, show them. Sarah looked puzzled. Show them what, sweetheart? The other dog tags. The ones you wear for Petty Officer Thompson. A shadow crossed Sarah's face. She reached beneath her uniform and pulled out a second set of dog tags, worn smooth from years of handling. Marcus Thompson, Alabama, 23 years old. He died completing a mission that saved 12 American civilian contractors. The courtroom fell completely silent. These remind me that service means sacrifice, that some people give everything so others can live freely. Sarah looked at Judge Hayes. Sir, I've missed birthdays and school plays and bedtime stories, but I've also prevented situations that would have cost other parents their children permanently. Judge Hayes removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. When he spoke, his voice carried newfound respect. Commander Anderson, this court owes you and your daughter an apology. Your service honors the finest traditions of the United States Navy. He turned to Emma. Young lady, you've shown remarkable courage in defending your mother's honor. The kind of courage that speaks well of how you've been raised. Captain Foster presented Emma with a small item, a memorial patch honoring fallen naval special warfare operators. From your mother's unit to commemorate your loyalty. Patricia Wells gathered her papers in defeat. The custody case had become something entirely different, a recognition of service and sacrifice. This case is dismissed, Judge Hayes announced. Commander Anderson, thank you for your service to our nation. As they left the courthouse together, Emma walked between her parents, finally understanding that some sacrifices honor everyone they touch. To everyone who typed honor and shared where you're watching from, thank you for standing with our heroes. Subscribe for more stories like this. See you in the next one.